Hey, Shalom, Call Allah, Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, Bashim Chakadash, the ones of the apostles of great millstone that rule well. And Shalom to you brothers in the highways and byways doing the work sincerely, faithfully, and continually fighting that good fight of faith. Lord willing, we're finding that number to be delivered. Alright? As it's inevitable, we see the signs, we know the times, and we see the crimes that these devils have committed throughout the four corners of the earth. And now the Lord is about to make good on his promises and the prophecies through the prophecies. All right. And we understand and know that the dollar's on its way out. Now, the whole world, everybody in the world knows that the dollar's on its way out, but the people here in America. Okay. In casual conversations throughout, your daily goings, you start inquiring to these people, what you think about the dollar, how you feel about it. People have no idea, man. These people have no clue that the dollar's out of here. And then when you kind of break it down a little bit, they look at you like you got four heads. I'm like, what are you talking about? All right. But this is just another facet of America being Babylon. All right. Nothing but confusion over here, to the point where these people have no idea the so-called money that they have in their pocket is useless. All right. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna play this clip. It's about 5 minutes. Get a couple of scriptures, wrap it out. Here we go.
The dollar is facing a revolt. The world knows it as the king of currencies, but the dominance of the dollar is now under threat. More and more countries are looking for alternatives, and China's yuan is emerging as a clear challenger. Beijing is pursuing a string of deals. The latest one is with Brazil. Brazil and China are ditching the dollar. From now on, they'll use their own currencies for trade. So China is pushing the yuan. What about the Indian rupee? It's not far behind. The Indian rupee is also emerging as a serious contender. And why are these trends significant? Because currencies drive commerce. The dollar's dominance gives the US an outsized influence on the global economy, and a shift away from the dollar will only hurt America. It will also hasten the rebalancing of the global economy. In the next few minutes, we'll look at this trend and where this is going. First, the events in Brazil. Brazil announced the deal yesterday, and it did not come out of the blue. The agreement had been in the works for a while. A preliminary pact was signed in the month of January. It laid the foundations of the final agreement, and it's a fairly simple deal. Earlier, Brazil and China used the US dollar for trade. Now they will deal in their native currencies. China will use the yuan, and Brazil will use the Brazilian reais. How does it help? It will save costs. Look at the official statement from Brazil. This is what it says. The expectation is that this will reduce costs, promote even greater bilateral trade, and facilitate investment. China is Brazil's biggest trading partner. Last year, their bilateral trade was worth over $150 billion. So it makes sense for Brazil to ditch the dollar. But what's in it for China? Beijing is on a mission. It wants to internationalize the yuan. It is building a large coalition of partners. These are countries that will use the yuan instead of the US dollar, and Beijing has made considerable progress in this direction. It has secured bilateral pacts with 41 countries so far. The total value of these agreements is more than $500 billion. So the yuan is gaining international acceptance. And the petro yuan is rising. Now, what is the petro yuan? It's not a different currency. Petro yuan is simply using the yuan to settle oil bills, just like the petrodollar. And China is making an aggressive push for this. It is finding takers in oil-producing nations. Russia, for instance, it has embraced the yuan. So have Iran, Venezuela, and some African nations. Now, reports say Saudi Arabia is also considering the switch from the dollar to the yuan. And this is going to be a very important development. We know that Riyadh has been at odds with Washington and is getting closer to Beijing. But ditching the dollar will be a decisive move. Meanwhile, the Indian rupee is also competing in this race. Last year, India's Reserve Bank made a move. It allowed international trade settlements in the Indian rupee. It's still early days, but India has made progress. Banks in 18 countries have shown interest. They've opened special accounts, and these accounts will help them settle trade payments in the Indian rupee. And these are the countries we're talking about. They're ditching the dollar. They want to use the Indian rupee for trade with India. Earlier this year, Brazil and Argentina floated an idea. They're thinking about a common currency for South America. Halfway across the world, Southeast Asia too is losing patience with the US dollar. In Africa, countries like Kenya are dumping the dollar. They'll use the Kenyan shilling for oil imports. So here's a question. Why is all of this happening now? Why is there a global rebellion against the dollar? Also, how did the dollar become the world's reserve currency? It happened after the Second World War in the year 1944. 44 allied countries met at Bretton Woods in the US. 44 countries came together. They wanted to avoid another financial turmoil, so they created a system, a set of rules that would shape the global economy as we know it today. It led to the creation of the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, also the World Bank. The Allies also agreed to a new exchange rate system. Each country pegged the value of its currency to the US dollar, and that's how the American dollar gained its dominance. The Bretton Woods Conference gave the US immense power to dominate the global economy. It created two financial institutions, the IMF and the World Bank, largely controlled by America. And they're still quite powerful and still led by the US. As for the dollar, it is still widely used, both inside and outside the US. About $1 trillion notes are in circulation outside America. Some 40% of the world's debt is issued in US dollars. Nearly 60% of the global currency reserves are in US dollars, and close to 90% of all foreign exchange trade involves the US dollar. The world economy is hooked to the dollar, but now it wants to give up this addiction, but it'll not happen overnight. The dollar's downfall, though, has begun.
You hear that? The dollar's downfall has begun. Now, she said a whole lot, all right? And again, the world knows that the dollar's being, devalued and being put out to pasture, but here in America. And these individuals here in America truly believe that this fiat money still has, power, and it doesn't have any power. James 5:3, it says, "Your gold and your silver is cankered, and the rest of them shall be a witness against you, and they shall eat your flesh as it were fire. You have heaped treasures together for the last days." All right. So when these other nations totally, eliminate the dollar from their currency or from their systems, America will still have access to the dollar, but it's not going to have any value. Okay? And again, this is going to force the hands of all the nations at the end of the day to go with that digital currency, leading into and ending with the MOTB. You see? All right, but it's a beautiful sight to see that these things are now unfolding right before our very eyes. Continuing on. This is Isaiah 14:10. It says, all they shall speak and say unto thee, art thou also become as weak as we? Art thou become like unto us? Right, because for years, America has blasted and, strong-armed and bullied and dominated all these other countries, primarily these smaller countries, with really no backing by any other superpower country. All right. But now that these smaller countries are being backed by these superpowers, Russia, China, these nations are now stepping up and now are looking at America as they're the ones that are now weak, because they are. All right. Here you have Brazil, which is a South American country, Brazil and Venezuela, but they're being backed by what? China, Russia, and these nations, and this is, what you would call a sister nation to America, as you have North America and South America. And the real downfall that's going to really affect a lot of those so-called, Brazilians and so on and so forth, those South American countries, because they still highly rely on the dollar, you know, especially over there in Brazil. The people themselves, revere the dollar as, king of kings. All right, but they're going to get used to using their own currency in whatever nation they decide to pair up with to try to, come together for a new type of a new common currency. But until then, they're going to get used to using their own currency because why? The American dollar is going to have no value. And some would say, you may want to take what little bit of money you have left and invest in these other countries in money system. But all in all, this thing is out of here, man. This thing is totally out of here. And it's a beautiful thing. And it's going to affect every single person in the United States of America, first and foremost. Let me see if I can bring this back a little bit. Let me see if I can get it. There we go, right there. All right. So these are all the countries that are ready to do away with the dollar. And as she said, these nations are fed up. They're done. It says United Kingdom. I can barely see it, but bear with me. If I can't really raise it out. United Kingdom, Germany, Russia, China, Israel, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Guyana, Botswana, New Zealand, Singapore, and Sri Lanka, and a couple other things I can't really read. It's too small. But these are all the people that are now ready and prepared to rid of the so-called US dollar, or the petrodollar, if you will. This is huge right here, man. This is huge. But the sad thing is, another sad thing, if you want to look at it this way, the American people, or the American government, is still telling the American people that everything's going to be all right. Everything is okay. All right? The dollar's going to have zero buying power. But you're going to find out real soon if you don't believe. If you do not believe. Jeremiah 50:23. It says, how is the hem of the whole earth cut asunder and broken? How is Babylon become a desolation among the nations? All right. Now, this can be twofold, especially when them thermonuclear missiles drop on here. But at the same time, this financial structure is used to having America as that hammer. The American dollar was king, man. As they used to say, cash is king. But it says, how is the hammer of the whole earth cut asunder and broken? Now, if you want to look at that from a financial perspective, it's broken how? Because the rest of these nations have now abandoned this method of currency, America's dollar. Okay, and it says, how has Babylon become a desolation among the nations? Again, financially, it's becoming a desolation because the other nations have now, stepped it aside and said, we're not using you anymore. Years ago, man, America was the place to be. America was a place everybody wanted to come to. Now it's a desolation among the nations. There's nothing of value here in America. And as a matter of fact, everything we get is outsourced from all these other countries anyway. But you're still gonna have these people, these brainwashed Nimrod, thinking people that this place is still, the light on the hill. America has proven itself to be circling the drain. There's so much confusion going on over here in this place. You don't, I mean, you can't even keep track of all the shit that's going on because it's so confusion. It's an absolute mess over here. Okay? So all that being said, it's on the verge. It's moving quickly. These nations are gearing up. They're preparing themselves. And pretty much they're ready, man. All the pieces have been put in place according to these other nations. So it's just a matter of time before it gets known and buzzed abroad that America's dollar has finally collapsed. But when it does collapse, when it fully collapses, these other nations are going to be affected because they're preparing themselves. All right? So with that, Lord willing, you're edified, and I'll see y'all brothers in another show. I say shalom.